All right, I see a few names coming in. I'll give everybody a couple more minutes to join the line before we kick things off. If you're just joining us, we're just waiting for people to fill in. We see some names still popping up in the attendee list. So just going to give it a couple minute or two, and then we'll get things going. Thanks. Okay, I think we'll get things started now. Thank you everybody for joining us today's session. We're going to do a quick 30-minute high-level overview of Quali Torque today. Just before we get going, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague. But before we get started, I want to just give everybody a couple of housekeeping tips. So we have Q&A is open, and we like to treat these as kind of informal sessions, right? A lot of our attendees on these are active Quali Torque users. So if you have specific questions that would be helpful for you to get more out of the platform, drop those into the Q&A. And I'll field those with our presenter. If we don't have time to get to every question live during the call, for the end, we're going to try to save a few minutes. And if we don't get to your question during the call today, we will someone on our team will follow up afterward. One other thing, if you're not currently a Quali Torque user, one of my colleagues will drop a link to go create a trial account. This is a pretty good opportunity to follow along, right? If you create a new account now, you can follow along with our presenter and get everything set up and get a good idea of how things work. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Carlos to kick things off. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Fonseca. I'm an SC with Quali based in the United States. And I'm just going to get started because there's a lot to go over and we don't have a lot of time. So this is the Quali Torque SaaS product. This is the UI. I'm currently logged in as an administrator, which is why you get to see a lot of stuff that give me an opportunity to share a lot of information with you. But we do have some role-based roles that will minimize what you see. So right now, don't get discouraged because you think everyone has keys to the kingdom. You can really pare this down to a user that can really only provision blueprints that you define for them with exactly the permissions and the parameters and the governance that you decide. So right now we're looking at what is known as our catalog. This is the self-service entry point for the users. Traditionally you need an environment for a particular project, a program, and you kick off the process by filling out a form, and then you sit there and wait while a bunch of teams in the background do a bunch of things. What we've done is we take all of those things that get done in the background that you're using today, the way you're using them today, and we unify them into these tiles. And they're not only to use to launch the blueprints, but they're also informational in nature. So by clicking a blueprint, the end user or the user gets to see if they have a description, if they're at the right place with the right blueprint that they want. It gives them an estimated time of deployment, activity around how many launches they've had, total launches, how many are currently running. Right now, there's 2 concurrent environments running from the same blueprint. And then a little bit around policies on the bottom, in particular around the durations, because Quali manages the duration, the environment lifecycle. So anytime you provision something, you will be able to give it an end date, and we will take care of terminating that environment when we're done. We also give you instructions. So if the end users aren't sure what to do, you can actually provide them with information before they deploy so that they know what they have to, if there's anything in particular they need to know before they deploy, they will have that information handy. This is our environment detail page. This is where you can give it a custom name. This is where you set the duration. So we give you different options, or 4 different options. You have by duration, where you can decide how long you want it. End time, if you're doing a program that's X number of weeks in length and you want to make sure that you keep it around long enough for at least that date to pass. And then we give you the opportunity to do always on if you're running into deploying production environments that don't have an end date. And then obviously the last version of this is you define for a particular blueprint what that duration should be, and the end user that uses it can only use it for the duration that you decide. There's a collaboration section here where you can pick collaborators. So if you're deploying an environment where you have team members that need to work with you, you can add them here. And once this provisions, all the notifications that come with this access, everything that you would get, they get as well, and they will have the same full access that you have in order to be able to use this environment. This is our environment parameters page or input page. We'll talk a little bit about what that is a little later in the demo, but this is where you get to give your users the opportunity to put inputs into these deployments that might be unique to what they're doing. You have the ability to mask these if you want, but it gives you the opportunity to, like a S3 bucket unique name, for example, or you can let them decide what region they want to provision to, while still minimizing the fact that I can go to any of the US West regions, but I can't provision this anyplace else. Tagging is something that we do in the background as default. There's tags for pretty much anything that you can imagine, from environment name, cloud, just anything that has been defined in these blueprints. There's tags that get automatically created for them. But we also give you the opportunity to define tags at the time of provisioning. So in the event that, like, I'm doing a demo, I want to tag this environment as a demo environment. And lastly, on this page, we have workflows. These are either day 2 actions that you would want to take, like a resetting of a VM, for example, or shutting something down. And it's also where we allow you to put scheduling for the environments that you're provisioning. So, for example, if you're running an environment that you only need from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, instead of keeping it on and absorbing all that cost that goes with it, not only financially, it could be resource costs. You might be resource constraint, right? If you're doing a hybrid solution and you're provisioning on-prem. This gives you the opportunity to define when these environments run. It lets you shut them down when you choose, power them back up before your end users need them. And in this case, I can disable a workflow because I'm an admin, but an end user, you might choose that this environment on Azure has to be powered off at 10 p.m. and powered on at 8 in the morning, for example. Oh, interesting. So I forgot to change my duration back. So that just told me that I didn't have permission to run this indefinitely. So see, I got to show you parameters and policies without even trying. Now,
Carlos, I'm going to take a second to jump in. We have a question on the workflows, and I think you can answer this one pretty quickly. The question is whether the workflows still require you to manually turn off the VMs.
No, the workflows will automatically take that action for you. It automatically will take the environment down, because it's not just a segment. It'll take your whole environment down at whatever time you choose, and then it'll bring it back up at whatever time you choose. And you can get pretty dynamic with it. You can say, I'm only here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, so I'm going to shut everything down at 8 p.m. I'm going to turn everything back on at 7 a.m. And then I'm going to shut everything down on the weekends. And you can have those dynamic workflows with that dynamic scheduling set up. You don't have to do anything. The same is true.
Perfect.
The same is true when we terminate the environment. If you said I want it for 10 hours, at the end of those 10 hours, Torque will takes the action to terminate that environment for you. So
Thank you, fellas.
while that's launching, I want to showcase a couple of things. I'll come back to the environments and I'll talk through the UI, but there's a couple of things that we do that are unique with these environments, right? When you deploy something in to the cloud, if you're using IAC technology, then you either have to update it because you're making changes to your Terraform or your cloud formation, for example, or your end users have made changes to the environment and you want to bring it back. So to change something in the infrastructure and reflect that in your running environments, we call those updates. To rectify changes that are made by the user post provisioning and bring them back to what you expect the environment to be running as we call drift. And in the case of sorry, in the case of sorry about that, guys. It somehow it rectified my environment for me without me asking it to do that. I must have been playing with something before the demo. So I'll be able to show you update. It's the same process, it's just a different button. But in this particular case, I went into my Terraform code and I made a change in the code, and now I want to. I'm being notified that there's a change that my admins have made to my environment, and I need to reflect that. So if I go here in my update options, this will actually tell me what is happening in the environment in terms of my changes. So I made some changes to some of the names, and now in the Terraform, and now I need that to be reflected here. So all I have to do is click update and update the change. I'll get a notification box that's telling me what my dependencies are. It tells me what it is that I'm changing, and then I just approve it, and it goes off, and it basically will take that new Terraform that was deployed, and I'll get to absorb those changes into my environment. With Drift, which is the change on the user side, what winds up happening is you wind up with this check for drift box, goes out, it looks at what your configuration is today, and then it reflects back to what your configuration was in your IAC platforms. And if there's a discrepancy, then this will tell you what the discrepancy is, and it'll give you the opportunity to update your running environment to bring it back to what the expected standard is at that particular time. So while we're here, let me talk a little bit about the interface and all the features that you get with this with Torque. So these are your components. These are the two components that we provisioned. We have a introspection view, which we call our resource catalog. This allows you to get information from the environment without having to necessarily give the keys to the kingdom to anybody. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I deployed this. I didn't give it any AWS account information. I don't know any of that. This is all happening in the background because the blueprints have been predefined with whatever credentials are needed for me to do, for me to be able to provision this and to be able to use this environment. In the case that you want someone to be able to put those in for whatever reason, that's something that you can do. But here you'll see all of the information around the environment that, for example, a developer may need to do some additional work in his or her application. It also gives you all the tags that I talked about earlier, all the tags that are being deployed by automatically in the background. You know, the source, cost centers, the demo that I selected at the time of provisioning, and you also get a view of the actual code that is being deployed in the background in the event that a developer needs to see that. If you need to extend it, so you'll get notified via email if this environment's ending in 2 hours and you're not done, you miscalculated when you thought you were going to be done with it. You can basically click the extend, and whatever permissions you were given at the time that you deployed this, they'll still apply. So if you're able to run an environment for 3 days and you launched it for 2 hours, you'll still have those 2 and 3/4 days, for example, to extend the environment. Just pick a new time, then submit, and it extends it for you. You can also add people if all of a sudden you have a new team member and you're halfway through a sprint. You can add people after the fact so that they can start to collaborate with you in the environment. So how do we do all of this, right? I talked a lot about IAC code and I talked about blueprints, right? How do we get from what you have today to a working blueprint? Well, the way you do it is we give you the opportunity and the option to connect to your repos, right? You basically give it your path, you give it a name, and when you do that, you wind up with a repo. And in these repos, you have the ability to discover your assets. And this is looking at your Terraform code as it sits today. And we're able to look at CloudFormation, Kubernetes, Docker, Helm charts. It'll find whatever you have in your repositories. And then you basically you select it, you generate a blueprint from it. You can see the code that is being generated. Now, we don't import anything into Torque. We're not importing your Terraform. We're leveraging the Terraform that you have in your repositories. We're just we're creating a blueprint that wraps that code. We take the pointers to it, and then we allow you to add outputs, inputs, etc. You can manipulate this multi-cloud. This is where you get to take advantage of those hybrid multi-cloud blueprints that you don't have to continue to change the Terraform code. If you build your Terraform code or your CloudFormation code or whatever modular, then you can just take those modular building blocks and then create, using these blueprints, more advanced and more robust environments. So once you click finish, if you go back to the blueprint, you'll see that my blueprint was created. This is it right here, S3. I haven't, if I want to publish it, I just click on the publish button, and then it'll come in my catalog for folks that don't have these blueprint views to be able to use. I can just go here, simple as clicking launch. I give it a name. I select an agent, and I'm going to keep everything else the same, and I just launch it, and it goes off, and it'll actually create that S3 bucket for me. This is the bulk of where your admins are. From a Torque perspective, you have producers and consumers, but it's not like your end users are the consumers and your admins are the producers, because an IT division that is provisioning environments, for example, they're consumers of securities policies and their rules, and those will be implemented into the system, and they'll get to use those. This is where the administrators will create their blueprints, and you can actually, you don't need to create the modular approach at the Terraform side. If I have an instance and I have an S3 bucket and I have an RDS configuration, I could just create a blueprint and nest all three of those together, and I'll be able to deploy a pretty robust environment. This is where your environment view lives. We talk about easy deployments and self-service, but that comes with the responsibility of being able to terminate things when you don't need them. If you can deploy them within seconds, then why keep them longer than you have to? And this is a view, depending upon what your role is, where a manager can come in here and he can see that this back-end environment is still running. It was provisioned by Carlos, and it should have been shut down a month ago. They can come in here and they can go and they can shut things down themselves. You can change your views. You can filter things so you can see things by status. I only want to see the things that are active. It gives you a way to really see what's happening in your environment and control what you see. This leads us to reporting, right? We talk a lot about savings. We talked about those workflows and how they save you, potentially can save you money. Well, our costing view, we integrate directly with your cloud providers using your account and your contracts, and we get your actual costs for these deployments. And if you remember when I was provisioning earlier, there was, sorry, let me, that some of these had costs associated with them. These are actual costs of what it'll cost you per hour to run your environment, based on what your contract states. And if you were to deploy something for 5 hours and it's $1 an hour, it'll actually tell you that that environment's going to cost you $5 to run. We break it down by cloud. We break it down by blueprint. We give you your hourly activity. We show you a lot of information around the environments themselves, the activity around those environments, so that you can, let's say you're provisioning stuff and your instances are too large, and you're seeing that you're spending too much money on T3 larges when you can be running T3 smalls in AWS, for example. You can go in here and you can identify all that information to try to bring you down cost. And not to talk about futures, but there's a box that's going to come in the very, very near future, which it'll actually give you your estimates of the cost savings that you're having. It'll show you how much money you've saved over time using the product. So we talked earlier about the guardrails and the ability for you to not let your users do whatever they want, right? So we have policies. The policies are built the same exact way that the blueprints are. This OPA is a public repo. Well, this one is ours, but there's public repos that you can connect to. And once you connect to those repos, you can discover policies, and it's the same way. You go through, you define what policy you need, you bring it in, and then you can make it for a particular space. Because I didn't talk about spaces, but we define our environments. We break it down into spaces. Those are our containment units. You can have a policy that's environment that's SaaS wide, or you can have a policy that's for a particular space. But the thing with this is it gives you the ability to really save yourself from stuff. We've heard of people deploying things to AWS and having open buckets. You can create a policy that doesn't let that ever happen. Anybody that ever deploys an S3 bucket would by default have to have it so that it's private. They could not deploy something that would be public. And then on the workflows, I talked about those earlier. So I think I'm going to wrap up with showing you one last thing, which is our integrations. We talk a lot about managing your software, your environment development process, right? So your environments themselves live in CI/CD pipelines. There's the tool itself. You may have Snow as your front end. You may have a system that you need to deploy tickets to. You might use Azure DevOps. So we actually have integrations where you can connect your existing environments that you use today, just like we're using your IAC repositories. We can tap into Jenkins. You can use Jenkins to deploy environments as you run through the life cycle. It allows you to integrate with the things that you've already purchased so that you get more value out of the spend that you have already taken in your environment. So on that note, Colin, I'm trying to give you some time to ask questions. I'm going to stop.
Yeah, that's perfect. That leaves us about 5 minutes. We promised a 30-minute session. We do have a couple of questions that came up, but you were on a little bit of a roll, so I decided to save them for the end. So you touched on workflows a couple of times. We did have someone ask how workflows are configured. Do you think you can spend a couple of minutes just showing how that works?
Sure. So we have out of the box workflows that you get to use from day one. And right now, this is a closed workflow system. So these are the workflows that are available to you. We're going to open this up pretty soon to allow you to create your own workflows so you can have as many day two actions as you want. But here, for example, if I want to have a workflow where I terminate an environment, I can select a space, right? This is for space. You can create spaces based on projects, based on divisions, based on whatever you want. So I can apply these workflows to that, or I can just say I want them on my entire account for all the workflows. If it's a scheduling one, I get to define the schedule of how I want it. I can do custom cron jobs. And then once I save them, I have them available to me. And then I either enable them here, or I can enable them at the time of provisioning if it's something that I don't want to be active all the time, or I can make it something that no one touches. So if I want my environments to power down at 5 o'clock every day, and you don't have a choice, I set it up that way, and that's the workflow, and everyone that uses the system has to adhere to that.
Perfect. We had another question come up. You mentioned this briefly, and this question came up around then. And I thought it was actually a pretty good way to set this up. But they asked if they have to use their own agent. And I know that we offer our own Quali hosted agent. Do you mind just taking a second to walk through that?
Yeah, so I guess I should have touched on that. I apologize. But so we have agents that for most of the cloud environments today. You can build them for Azure, GCP, AWS. We have Kubernetes and Docker. It's got the VMware logo, but it's really a Docker agent. So anywhere that you can have a Docker container, anywhere that you can have a Kubernetes container, and on any of these clouds, there's an agent that you can build and connect it to your environment. We also have a Quali agent, which would allow you to pass your cloud credentials through our Quali agent, and it allows you to start using the environments right away, right? So you don't have to set up a Docker, set up a EKS cluster, do whatever it is that you need to do to get your environment set up. We can actually, by taking if you gave us the ability to use your credentials, which we don't see, you can actually input them in, and then it's not something that we can see. It's not something that we store in a readable format. You can start deploying EC2 instances in AWS within minutes.
Perfect. And one last question. We just have about 2 minutes left. But this came up when you were showing a repository with all the different types of modules in there. Do we support Ansible? And I thought that was a good setup to talk about the types of configuration tools that we do support.
Yeah, so we have a lot of grains. That's what we call our modules that support. We support Ansible, we support DigitalOcean, AWS, Azure, all the clouds that you saw with the agents. We have support for all of that and more.
Great. So yeah, we're just about at time. Carlos, thank you again for taking the time. I thought this was great. Thank you to everybody for spending a few minutes with us today. And thanks to Corey for getting everything set up in the background. This was a really valuable session today.